My autobiography, The First Years of My Life. I was born on April the 17th, 1902 in Perry County, near Old Bethlehem Church, about 20 miles from Marion, Alabama. My paternal grandfather was Elijah Hobson. He went into the Civil War and never came back. We think he died of some kind of fever and was buried somewhere in Georgia. My daddy was only 12 years old at the time Granddaddy left home. I have heard my grandfather say that Granddaddy told him to be a good boy and take over the farm. Wilma has a coat that Grandmother spun the thread, made the cloth and coat, which my daddy wore during the war. My grandmother Hobson's name was Emily McCrary. I don't know when she died, but was buried at Old Mulberry Church in Bibb County. I can remember going to her funeral as I rode a horse behind Daddy and Wilma, who were in a surrey. I remember that the horse trotted and made my side hurt. My paternal grandfather's name was Jacob Golden, born March 23rd, 1827, and died March 8th, 1877. He was buried in Old Salem Church Cemetery, Perry County, near Hyberg, Alabama. I got these dates from his tombstone. Grandmother Golden was Lucinda Cruz, reared in Perry County, buried at Bethlehem Church in Perry County. I barely remember her as my mother Ford and I lived with her for a while. I was named for both my grandmothers, Emma taken from Emily and Lou from Lucinda. My father's name was Joseph Colin Hobson, born January 15, 1852, and died January 25, 1936. He was buried at Old Bethlehem Cemetery in Perry County. I remember it being so cold the day he was buried. Charlie and I went to the funeral in his old car, which broke down on the way home. It happened that Howard, my brother, was behind us in the truck. He pulled us into Bessemer, where we spent the night with his sister Mamie. I was nearly frozen when we got there, as we had no heat in the car. We went home on the train, and Charlie went back later, had the car worked on, and brought it home. My mother was Samantha Jane Golden Poole. She died February 3rd, 1932, and buried February 7th, 1932, in Bethlehem Church Cemetery. She had married Price Poole and had Ford. Her husband died with TB and left her with a small boy to rear. Joseph Colin Hobson and Nanny Golden were married February 5th, 1879. Nanny died June 10th, 1899. They had 6 children, 4 girls and 2 boys. The girls were Lily, Callie. The boys were Vester and Howard. Wilma was 2 years old at the time Mother died. My daddy needed a wife to help take care of his children, and my mother needed a husband to make her and afford a living. So even though my daddy was 20 years older than Mother, they were married more for convenience than love. It so happened that he married sisters. They married in 1900. I was born April 17, 1902. It happened that Daddy was in bed with typhoid fever at that time. All babies were born at home back then. Mother sent the oldest boy, Vester, to get the doctor, and she sent Howard with the younger children to get Grandmother Golden, and asked Grandmother to come be with her. Vester had to ride a horse after the doctor. Then the doctor had to drive with horse and buggy probably several miles. So before the doctor got there, I was born, even before Grandmother Golden got there. I have heard my older sister Lily say that she went to milk the cows, and when she came in, she heard me cry. My mother called her to come with me so I would not strangle. I can still hear her say, "I was the first to ever lay eyes on you." By the time the doctor got there, my grandmother had me dressed. Gee, I'd hate to have babies under those conditions. Some of Daddy's children were old enough that they resented my mother taking things in hand. Therefore, everything in the home wasn't as pleasant as should be. One day, while Daddy had gone to Marion on business, my mother took me and Ford and went to Grandmother Golden's. Daddy was surprised when he got home and Fanny was gone. I was only a baby at the time. I can remember after I got older that Daddy would come to see me and beg Mother to go back with him, but she never would. As soon as Ford was old enough to plow, probably 8 or 10 years old, my mother, Ford, and I moved to a little farm belonging to a family of Tuckers. I could remember the old house that we lived in. It was a frame house, never painted, consisting of one large bedroom, a kitchen, and a big open hall between. There were no glass windows. They had shutters made of wood that held on hinges to open and shut. No one had screen doors or windows. The bedroom had a big fireplace, and we all slept in the same room. We got water from a large spring down under a hill. We had to go down there to do the wash. Some things I remember while living there are as follows. Once Ford asked me if I wanted to ride the mule to the water. Of course I said yes. He put me on the mule, bareback, and then made him run down the hill. I was frightened and nearly fell off. We lived near Sardis Church, which had a pool used for baptizing. One day Ford took me with him to wade in the pool. He led me out in the middle where the water was up to my head and walked out and left me. When he saw he had teased me enough and I was quite scared, he came back and led me out. The worst thing was that just after we came out, a large moccasin snake came crawling out. We were both scared then to think we could have been snake bitten. Another time we were getting ready to go somewhere. Ford had the mule harnessed and hitched outside the fence. Ford had 2 dogs that he kept in the fence. He heard the dogs bark. Upon looking out, he saw a mad dog jump the fence and fight with his dogs. He took his gun and got out the windows. The dogs even came into the hall and fought. Then the mad dog jumped the fence and left. Ford got on the mule, and with his gun, he followed the dog, calling at every house, "Mad dog coming." On the way, it bit a cow and came to the Tucker house. One of the older boys heard Ford calling, "Mad dog coming," in time to get his gun and jump between the dog and a small child in the yard and shot the dog just before it got to the child. I can remember seeing the cow after she went mad. She was fastened in a stall, pawing the ground and bawling until they shot and killed her. I've heard Ford say the hardest thing he ever had to do was to take his 2 dogs off and shoot them, but he did. Snakes and mad dogs were my greatest fears. I even dreamed about them at night. I must have started to school in Cookelsville at 5 years old, as I remember going with Ford and sitting there all day. I can't remember getting any attention. The schools then were 1 room, 1 teacher, all grades in the same room. Another thing I remember while living there was Ford and Mother picking cotton. I was so small, they put me on the paddock in the shade, and Ford broke stalks of cotton for me to pick while they worked. Another time, Mother took the clothes to the spring to wash. I wanted to wash the dishes. I was so small, I had to stand on the bench to reach them. I remember breaking one. I just knew Mother would whip me, so I not. One Christmas, Mother and Daddy each gave me a doll. One was a blonde and the other brunette. They were china, fastened in a box. I was never allowed to play with the dolls, only look at them. I had rag dolls to play with. I never knew what became of those dolls. Daddy used to come see me, and sometimes Mother would let him take me home with him for a few days. I enjoyed having Willen to play with, and of course Daddy pitied me. So I always cried when time for me to go home to Mother's. Once when he took me, he told Mother he wasn't going to bring me back until I wanted to come. I never asked to go back, so he didn't take me. I never saw Mother again until after I was grown. We wrote occasionally, but that was all. I was working in Birmingham at a telephone office and staying with a family of Jordans when Mother came to see me. Daddy did not believe in divorces, and for a long time he refused to give Mother one. I have in my possession a letter from the judge in Marion telling Mother that if she would send her brothers to talk to Daddy, he might be persuaded. Finally, in January 1909, the divorce was decreed. In the decision, it was said that I could stay with my daddy and go to school. That is what I did. Daddy thought it his duty to provide for me and my education. I was 7 years old at that time, in the first phase of my life. I remember the house my father owned on a farm. The house was a frame, unpainted building consisting of 2 large bedrooms with a wide open hall between. The kitchen was added on to one of the bedrooms with a porch beside it. Most houses then were made with wide open halls. To get to the kitchen, one had to go down the open hallway. In wintertime, that was quite cold. We had no heat in the kitchen but the wood cook stove. The bedrooms both had fireplaces in which we burned wood and pine knots. We bought coffee in the grain that had to be roasted and ground. We had a coffee mill, and it was my job to grind the coffee for breakfast. The open hall was a nice, cool place to sit in the summertime. On the well-to-do people painted their houses. You seldom saw a painted house in the country. On the farm, we grew corn, cotton, and ribbon cane in the bottom land. I helped strip the cane by making syrup, and cut it too. It was also very good to chew, which we enjoyed doing. Once Daddy let me and Wilma have a cotton patch of our own, and got the money from it. We had cows in the pasture, made of old rail fence. Sometimes the cows would knock the rails down and get out. We would have to drive them back in and find where they got out and mend the fence. Once when Daddy was gone for the day, Will and I were there alone, and 3 Negro men rode up on horses. They asked where Daddy was. Wilma told them he was over in the field. They rode on, but we were so scared we drove the cows away back in the pasture and ran all the way to our closest neighbor's house, which must have been a mile. Wilma says that we got 2 or 3 of their girls to go spend the night with us. We went to a one-teacher school called Mertz. The seats were long benches. All classes sat mixed. I sat by Wilma, even though we were not in the same grade. At the close of school, we had what we called a commencement exercise. A stage was built out front, and the students put on plays and recited poems. I must not have been more than 7 years old when I recited the whole poem, The Psalm of Life. I was so small I stood on a box. I was given a New Testament, which I still have. My teacher, Cousin Will Hobson, wrote in the front, given for good speaking at close of school. Eddie and Edna lived about 9 miles from us, near the post office of Hagler. They wanted us to move up close to them, so Daddy sold his home and we moved up there. Howard and Margaret lived near them too. We went to church at Old Union Church. Brother Wiggins was a pastor. I became good friends with his granddaughter Pearl and James Tomey. In fact, James was my first sweetheart. During a revival, Howard, Wilma, Pearl, Tommy, and I all joined the church. We were baptized in an old mill pond. It was so cold they had to break the ice. The school we went to there was called Data. It was only a one-teacher school and ran for only 6 months. We walked to school and sometimes had to walk over ice to get there. The school had a big pot-belly stove which we stood around to warm ourselves. While living there, Edna lost her first baby, and Howard and Margaret lost one. They were buried in Old Union Cemetery. Later, Howard and Margaret moved to Jefferson County near the people, the Hallmans. They had 9-month schools up there, and Howard talked Daddy into letting me live with them and go to school. After a year, Eddie and Edna moved up there too. Also, Daddy and Wilma came. We stayed with Eddie and Edna and both went to school. Daddy so wanted us both to get a high school education. Wilma was much in love with Ford Tubbs, and Daddy thought if he got her up there away from him, they would break up. It didn't work. Raymond and Lily came up for a visit, and Wilma went back with them and married Ford. Daddy was so angry with her he would not speak to her for a long time. I corresponded with James, Tommy. Daddy tried to stop us. I would have him send my letters to Ethel Fax, a good friend of mine, and she would give them to me. Eddie's mother and sister Isla Tingle lived nearby. Daddy and I, Miss Tingle and Isla, did all the hoeing for Eddie. We also picked cotton, stripped and cut sorghum cane for making syrup. Eddie's brother Oscar and he had a syrup mill. I sat and fed the cane into the mill. I also became the corn dropper for Eddie and Howard. They would go together to plant their corn. One lay off the rows and put out fertilizer. I followed, dropping the corn. The other followed me, covering the corn. I walked from sunup till sundown, dropping corn until both got their crops planted. Later, we had to thin the corn and chop cotton. Isla and I worked side by side on that. Sometimes we would hire out and chop cotton for 50 cents a day. Picking cotton was what hurt me the most. It made my side and stomach hurt to stoop and pick. The school we went to is called Corner. It still exists and is a good consolidated high school. I must have been in the 5th grade when I entered there. It was a 9-month school. Isla and I decided we were tired of working on the farm. So I went to Bessemer and stayed with her older brother and worked in a 10-cent store in Bessemer. Cousin Martha Sadman, who lived in Ryland, told Daddy that if I was determined to work, he should send me to a business college. So Isla and I both entered Spencer Ellis Business College in Birmingham. I finished the course, but Isla took sick with TB and never finished. She went back to Corner where she died. Her mother died later of the same disease. While attending business college, I stayed with a cousin Elisha Lee and his wife in Inslee. One night I went to see Isla before we knew she'd had TB. I slept with her and remember that she coughed all night. Afterwards, for years, I was afraid I would have TB. It was while I was staying at Cousin Elisha's that James Tommy came to see me. I suppose that was the last time I ever saw him. We broke up later. Cousin Sam Lee, Katie Russell, and her brother Bunny and I became very good friends. We went into Birmingham to picture shows and ate out quite a bit. I thought I was in love with Bunny, but he wasn't with me, just friends. We wrote to each other, and after I came to Itala, he came to see me once. I guess that is the last time I ever saw him. After finishing business college, I could find only temporary jobs. I knew some friends that worked at the telephone office in Birmingham. They helped me get a job working there from 1 till 11 p.m. I stayed in West End with a family I knew by the name of Jordan. The streetcar came right by the house and would let me off in front of the house. It was while I was working there that Mother came to Birmingham to see me. I had not seen her since I was 7 years old. Also, Ford was at Florence at that time. He had finished a 2-year college and was teaching in a woodworking shop. He and Mother lived in an apartment there. Once when he was coming through Birmingham, he contacted me and I met him at the depot. He talked to me about going to college at Florence. I didn't see how I could, as I lacked 1 year finishing high school and had no money either. He said if I could manage to pay my tuition and buy my books, that my board would not cost me anything. I started saving what I could and borrowed some money from Cousin Sam Lee and entered Florence in 1921. By Ford managing my schedule and helping me what he could, I finished in 1924. In the meantime, I took time out and taught a 6-month school in West Point, Coleman County. It was a 3-teacher school. I taught 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades. I boarded with the principal and his wife, who lived just across the street from the school. Their name was Morris. In the meantime, Ford married. He went to the AEA in Birmingham and slipped out and came to Gadsden and married Annie Jo Williams. When I went back to finish my training, Mother and I had an apartment and lived together. I graduated in the summer of 1924. Ford became ill and he and Annie Jo came to Gadsden. He was in the Old Baptist Hospital. When he got better, he and Joe went to Colorado and went to school at Greeley Teachers College. Ford worked on his master's in education and Joe in home economics. Mother joined them out there. One summer while they were in school there, they invited Mr. and Mrs. Festus Cook and me to come out there and go to school. We went on the train. Later, Irene Brown, a good friend of mine, came too. We went to school the first 6 weeks, but took out the last part of the school and went to Yellowstone Park. We were gone 21 days. Mother did not go. Ford, Joe, Festus, and Deline rode in Ford's car. Irene and I rode behind them in her small Chevrolet. Ford and Joe slept in their car. The rest of us slept in a tent. We had a wonderful time. This was after I had taught in Attala 1 year. This summer I graduated from Florence. Mr. Breeden, the superintendent of schools in Attala, came to Florence looking for teachers. He hired me, Mrs. Lyon, and a Mrs. Reed. All I knew about Attala was that it was near Gadsden, Annie Jo's home. I consulted Ford about the job, and he said, take it. My starting salary was $80 per month, and I taught 5th grade. After teaching 5th grade, for 2 years, then I went to 3rd grade. When I first came to Attala, I boarded with Mrs. W.L. Gilliland. She kept 3 of us. Berta Lee Chandler, she was at that time. Lucille Weed and I at Christmas time. Lucille left us to get married, and Gladys Hubbard Drake took her place. Mother was with Aunt Ludy in Tuscaloosa, but Ford asked me to get an apartment and take her for the winter. I rented an apartment from Mrs. Tatum. The house stood on the lot that I later bought, thinking I might move my house on it. We had a bedroom, kitchen, and bath in the back of the house. When school was out, Mother went to Amarillo, Texas to join Ford and Annie Jo. The next school year, I boarded with Mr. and Mrs. Breeden on 4th Street. The first fellow I dated here was Stanley Brock. I met him in training union. I was with him at Etowah High at something to do when I saw Charlie for the first time. He came in with Mamie Abercrombie. I knew Mamie, so I asked Stanley who it was with Mamie. He told me and asked if I wanted to meet him. I said no, I was just interested in who he was. Charlie lived on North 4th Street, was just beyond the school where I taught. He said he would see me sitting on the front porch at the Breedens in passing and wanted to meet me. Once in the fall, Bertie Lee and I rode the train to Birmingham to go shopping. I bought my winter coat. When we got back to the train station, in Attala, John Lyon and Charlie were there to meet us. John had been going with Bertie Lee, so he introduced me to Charlie. He took me home and from then on we dated regularly. It was the next summer that I went to Colorado with Mr. and Mrs. Cook. I corresponded with him regularly while out there. It was the next Christmas, December 24th, 1926, that we married. In the meantime, I had started boarding with Mr. and Mrs. T.S. Williams, where some of the other teachers were boarding. We had a home wedding at their house. The other teachers gave me a linen shower and helped me plan the wedding. The house had upstairs to it, so by the wedding march I came down the stairs and met Charlie at the foot. A brother Patterson that was pastor of the church at that time married us. We just invited the teachers and a few friends. After we decided to get married, Charlie bought the home on East Fifth Avenue. We would go over at night and paint some inside. He and his mother moved in before we were married. We bought our furniture before we were married and had it all in place. One bedroom suite, a living room and dining room suite, which I still have except for part of the dining room set, as I didn't have room for it in the apartment. We spent our first night in our home. Not having money for a real honeymoon, we went to Bessemer to see his sister for a few days. Of course, he had to get back to work in the steel plant, and I had to go back to teaching. His mother lived with us until she died, and was a great help to me while I was teaching, and especially after the children came. I taught 2.5 years after I married, before Curtis was born, in November 3rd, 1929. Charlie was so proud that it was a boy. He had said he wanted a boy and a girl. We were lucky, as that is just what we had. Betty Sue was born September 13th, 1933. We had it pretty rough financially after I quit teaching, as we did not have the home paid for, and Charlie did not make a big salary. 1 or 2 winters I taught what we called adult classes. I taught in the home and taught reading, spelling, and sewing. We had a cow and sold milk and butter, which helped some. I taught kindergarten and first grade in my home. One year Curtis could not enter first grade of school because his birthday was too late, and he wanted to be in the group that John Allen and some other boys he played with. I found there were several in that position, and the school principal said that if I taught them and kept them up with the class at school, they could enter regular school after Christmas. I kept in touch with Mrs. Lyon and kept my children up with hers. They entered regular school and made the grade. During the war, I got a job at the steel plant, at the shell plant up on North 3rd Street. I worked for the government at checking the shells to be sure they passed government inspection. I worked from 1 to 11 and walked home across the railroad tracks and on home alone by myself. I was a little afraid, but I did it. One winter I substituted for 2 months for Elizabeth Duke at Phillips Schools. I rode up with the postman and back home on the bus. It was night when I got home. I could never have done all these things if Charlie's mother had not been living with us at that time and took care of the children. She was so much help and seemed to enjoy it. Another thing we did to make a little money was to rent rooms to couples whose husband was stationed at Camp Cybert. We rented the bedroom across the hall and gave them kitchen privileges. One couple was George and Rose Gould. Another family was the Comstocks. They had a girl and a baby. At one time we had a lady whose husband was in the hospital at Cyberton. Her name was Marjorie. When Betty Sue was 3 years old, Inez came to live with us. She worked at the cotton mills for a while, and then she went to business college and got a job at Goodyear in the office. She paid board and stayed with us 12 years. In the meantime, my teaching certificate ran out, and Mr. Ray promised he would hire me if I renewed my certificate. I took extension courses and went to Jacksonville until I graduated in 1945. I had a hard time as Grandma had died, and I had no one to look after the children. So some summers I sent them to the country to stay with Edna and Edna. Some summers I hired a colored girl to stay with them. A group of us went in a car. We had to leave home early, and we had an 8 o'clock class. Then I had to come home and cook, wash, and study by lamplight with no air conditioning. I had a lot of reading to do, and that was hard. Finally, Mr. Breeden hired me for first grade. Betty Sue was in third grade at that time. I taught first grade for 24 years and retired in 1966. The first trip Charlie and I made after we married was one summer. Annie, Joe, and Ford came, and they invited us to go on a trip with them. Neither of us had any children then. We went in Ford's car. Our main place to go was Washington, D.C. We spent one night there and toured the White House and museum and other places of interest. We came back by Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and saw the old battlegrounds and panorama of the battles. That is the only long trip Charlie and I ever took together. We were never alone in our home very much. Charlie's mother lived with us until she died. Inez lived with us 12 years. After she married, Neil Miller came and stayed 2 years and worked at WGAD radio station. He married while staying there. After that, Charlie and I were left alone as Curtis went into the Air Force and Betty Sue was in school in Jacksonville. She taught 1 year in Georgia and Charlie died March 9, 1954. Betty Sue and Roy married April the 6th the same year. Betty Sue traveled with Roy that summer, so while he was working for Singer Sewing Machine Company. That fall, Betty Sue got a job teaching in Gadsden, and they came home. Roy got a job at Air Depot, and they lived with me 5 years. The depot closed down, and Roy was sent to Montgomery to work. Susan was born while they lived with me, and Donna was born soon after they moved to Montgomery. It was while they lived with me that I was able to save enough money to take a trip to Europe and Germany to see Curtis and family. He had married Charlie Jean Payne whom he met in school at Jacksonville, and they had 3 children at that time. I had never been on a plane before, and I went all by myself. Curtis met me in Frankfurt, Germany. I stayed over there 6 weeks. Janet was a baby. While there, Curtis took me to Amsterdam, Holland to see the tulips. It was a little late for them to be at their best, but we went to the hothouse where they had all kinds of bulbs in bloom. I bought some bulbs and had them shipped home. Tulips and crocus, they bloomed every year until I had to move and the house took away. Curtis and I spent one night in Amsterdam. We had a guide and he took us to see the most important places. One was a little miniature city called Madeira Dams, which was very interesting. Then we went to the place that the real Dutch people lived and saw how they dressed. I bought some pictures of them and other places we saw. One weekend, Charlie Jean and I took an American Express bus and went to Paris. We spent one night there and saw the things of interest. Curtis took a few days off and we drove to Venice, Italy. Charlie Jean got a maid to keep Barbara and Janet, and we took Alan with us. Venice is a very interesting place. I enjoyed it very much. On that trip we went to the salt mines and took a trip down into the mines. I have a picture of us on a little train that took us down. We also visited Hitler's hideout and went into the underground building. We saw where he slept and also his mistress' place where she slept. We could see what was called Eagle's Nest from where we stayed. It was a place where Hitler met his officials and no one was allowed there. We went to a place called Garmisch, Germany, in the southern part. We went to Oberammergau in the mountains, which is very pretty. The Lindenthal Castle was very interesting. We spent one night there in a government hotel. I have some good pictures in my scrapbook of these interesting places. In going to Italy, we went through Brunner Pass and Innsbruck, Austria. We saw the big ski range, which so many go to ski in the winter. After this trip, I took one by myself on the bus to Switzerland. There were a lot of people on the bus just touring like I was. We spent one night at Bern, Switzerland, which is the capital. It was so pretty with mountains all around. Of course, I have pictures of these too. And while there, I bought myself a watch and Inez a cuckoo clock. I had one that Curtis and Charlie Jean had sent me from Switzerland. Switzerland is a very pretty place. I bought a set of china in the place where we went through there in Germany. I had it shipped home and not a piece was broken. Curtis and Charlie Jean lived in a village called Vogelweg, especially for service people. It was near the town called Kaiserslautern. It was an interesting little town. That is where I bought my china. This was a place that they made china, and Charlie Jean and I went through it and saw them make it from dust to the finish. A friend of Charlie Jean's took me to ride one day, and we rode down by the Rhine River. We saw some beautiful old castles and went in one. When I got ready to come home, Curtis and all the family brought me to Frankfurt to catch the plane. While waiting there, we went through the zoo, one of the biggest in the world. My round trip over there and back, plus all the souvenirs I bought, I spent around $1,200. I could never have done it if Betty Sue and Laura had not been living with me and paying most of the bills. Susan was born in August after I got home from Germany. Mrs. Jones babysat for Susan, and Betty Sue went back on to teaching that fall. I have made many interesting trips in my life, most since Charlie died. I have made 2 or more trips to Colorado to see Ferdinand and Joe. One summer, Laura and Betty Sue and I drove out there before Susan was born. We went through Texas to see Laura's brother Doyle, and we went through Mammoth Caves, which was very interesting. Then we went by Lamesa, Texas to see an old friend of mine, Irene Brown. We were friends in school with Florence and corresponded until she died. We came back through Dayton, Ohio to see Curtis as he was stationed there at that time. I have made one trip to see Annie Jo since Ford died. We went to the mountains and spent a few days. After Betty Sue and Laura moved to Montgomery, I wasn't alone very long. Ruth Sis was teaching at the same place Betty Sue taught, and she needed a place to stay after Mrs. Riddle died. So I rented her the room across the hall with kitchen privileges. She stayed with me 8 years. She had to go back to Scottsboro to teach so she could help look after her sick parents. We really enjoyed each other, and I really missed her when she left. I have been by myself ever since, living alone. There are some advantages of living alone. One can go to bed or get up as they wish, eat, and so forth just when they wish. But I admit I get lonesome lots of times. Since living alone, I have made several nice trips. I went on a New England fall tour trip. This was very nice. The trees were beautiful, and we saw many antique places. Of all the places I saw, I liked Longfellow best. We were gone 10 days and went as far as Maine. I have made several nice trips on the church bus. We went to the mountains and stayed over one night. We have been to Callaway Gardens, saw the little White House. We went to Mobile and saw the Bellingraph Gardens and many beautiful azaleas. Another trip we made was to Helen, Georgia. The little town was very queer. The houses were copied after some in Germany. We also saw a beautiful waterfall. Another trip we took to Chattanooga when we saw the Chattanooga choo-choo train station. We ate in the dining room there. In fact, we hadn't been to see all the important places around. One